You never know, hang on to it.
Okay, it is just past the hour of 7 o'clock, so I will call this evening's meeting of the Appropriations Committee for February 8th to order. I think the first item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes, but actually, I think we will move item 2 up to number 1. I believe that's the order we should have it. So we'll have our election of officers first. Before I turn this over to John, I'd like to say on my own that I've, watching the Board of Selectmen and that, I don't believe our board should be going by longevity. I know though most of us that have been here the longest seem to be always in charge. I'd like to see our board rotated a little more. And so to do with that, I would like to nominate Tim as our new chairman. I will turn this over to John at this time.
So if you'd like, we'll run through the nominations for chair, vice chair, and clerk.
Okay.
If that works for you. All right, so for those of you, I think you've all been through this before. So in terms of the three positions, there'll be a nomination, a second, discussion, and then a vote. So the first thing to do would be to open up nominations for the chair. Is there a motion for a nomination for chair? I think, Rick, you kind of have one on the table. You want to repeat it?
Yes, I make a motion that we nominate Tim as the chairman.
So there's a nomination for Tim Kalin to take over as chair. Is there a second?
I'll second.
A second from George Brinkle. Are there any other, any discussion? Are there any other nominations for chair? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of Tim Kalin as chair? It's unanimous. Very good. Next order is to, if you'd like me, Mr. Chairman, to run through the last two appointments before you
Yeah,
take
that'd
over.
be great, thank you.
Very good. The next is for vice chair. Open nominations for vice chairman.
I'd like to nominate Rick Niebuhr.
Nomination for Rick Niebuhr as vice chair. Is there a second? Janice Height seconds. She got her hand up faster than you this time, George. We'll give the second to Janice. Is there any discussion? Are there any other nominations? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of Rick Niebuhr as vice chair?
Abstain.
Okay. It's 5-1. It's okay to vote for yourself if you want to. It's 5-1 with one abstention from Rick. The third is clerk. So open nominations for clerk. I'm trying to make somebody do the minutes. See, Janice knows. See how her eyes are furled up at me?
I don't remember our having a clerk.
Most do. And it's not, you can have one.
No, us,
Yeah.
not most.
Yeah. So typically, there's a chair, vice chair, and a clerk. It's the succession if everybody, if the terrorists take you guys out in order, you know, we have the clerk. So, so we will, for purposes of tonight, I would now open it up, nominations for clerk. I won't make you do the minutes, that was a joke.
You will, let's say what?
I won't make you actually do the minutes, I was only kidding about that.
I'd like to nominate Tony.
Okay. We have a nomination, is there a second?
Second. May I speak to that?
Sure.
You okay with that?
No, I will be leaving the committee at the end of April,
Okay.
when my term expires. If, you know, if everyone would like to have this for that time, that's fine with me.
Okay. So we have a nomination, is there a second for Tony as clerk?
Second?
We have a second. Any other nominations for clerk? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of Tony Petit for as clerk? Very good. You're 2 heartbeats away from taking over, Tony, so stay well. You guys want to switch seats or rotate here? Or did you just send it down? We can stay in the, however you guys want to do this.
Just stay for right now.
You might want to be at the head so you can see.
So do we all
Way
lay
down.
down? Wait a minute.
But you don't have to move.
Yeah, but you want to be here.
That's fine.
Where are you going?
Just stay, just move down 1 second.
Congratulations, I think.
Thank you.
Turn the meeting back over to you as the chairman, and we'll take up the minutes as a first order of business.
Thank you. First, I just want to thank everybody for their vote and their vote of confidence. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. So next on our agenda is the approval of the July 14th, 2022 minutes.
Move to approve the July 14th, 2022 minutes.
Second?
Yeah, George Brinkle as the second. You got a motion and a second?
Yep.
You wanna-
Any discussion? You're gonna have to help me get through. It's been a while since I...
That's all right. It's also hard to see on the straight table as well. So motion is second. Any discussion?
Any discussion? No? All
These
those,
are the minutes, these minutes, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. These are the minutes from the year-end transfer. So just so you know, as we try to do, when there's always going to be a gap when you end your meeting in the summer before you take up your business again. That's why we draft these minutes, and if you recall, we send them out to you, so if there's any issues, and then they're also available to the public as a draft, as is required under the public meeting, public records law, and public meeting law. So these have been available as a draft, so you've seen them, even though they go back to July 14th of 2022, so. All right.
so no discussion? All those in favor?
Wasn't there.
So passes 5 with 1 recusal,
Abstaining.
abstaining.
Janice abstained, she wasn't present, okay. Okay.
Next on the agenda is fiscal year 2024 state aid update. John, you want to take over?
Yeah, so in your packet, you have an article from the Mass Municipal Association. So I actually watch this every year. The state does a revenue consensus hearing, and essentially what's the Department of Revenue, it's the House Ways and Means, Senate Ways and Means Chair, Department of Revenue, and they bring in economists and various folks. Moody's Analytics usually provides the analysis. And the point of this exercise is to look at what the state of the economy is and to get a revenue consensus number for what they'll be beginning to build their budget around. And so, as you can read in the article, basically they announced that the tax collections are expected to grow by 1.6% in fiscal 2024 over this year. So I will share with you, as is always the case, they bring in a bunch of economists, and my undergraduate degree is in economics, and I always remembered my economics professor saying he chose the top 10 economists that predicted what was going to happen last year and who came the closest. Then he'd show you from the next year, and it was never the same top 10 people. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of variety. The good news is the consensus was that the economy is stabilizing. Last year, we heard a lot of woes and worries about recessionary headwinds. There's still a little bit of that, but basically they said the consensus was that we've sort of buoyed back from the pandemic, and now it's sort of a slow improvement. So same thing happened in Northborough. The restaurants opened back up, and then the taxes from that and the local receipts started to flow again. Income tax is like 57% roughly of the state budget, so that came back fast. But now they're predicting a much slower rate of increase moving forward. It was interesting though, because several of the economists, the Department of the Mass Taxpayers is always the most pessimistic. That they think things are going to basically not grow at all. And then you had several economists who felt like it could range up to 4, 5, or 6% in terms of growth. But there's all kinds of caveats. The long and short of it is, for budget planning purposes, this is the number that the governor will be using. And now this information, normally I have this information right around the time that we meet in December when we talk about the financial trend monitoring and the forecast. But because of the new administration, everything is delayed. This didn't happen until much later, and the governor still, because it's a change in administration, normally the governor would have to have her budget out by the third week in January. That date is long past, but because it's a new administration, they have until March. So the bottom line is slow growth, reasonable growth. Information will come very late this year for us in terms of our budget. But as you know from every year that we talk about the forecasts, Northborough generally doesn't see more than 1% increase in state aid, maybe 1.5%. Because most of the money, if the state has more money, most of it's going to go towards the Student Opportunity Act in the form of aid to districts, school districts that are in need. So really nothing new here. I think the positive thing I took away from it was they were all fairly confident that barring, another outbreak of another variant or something that would impact or shut down the economy, that we are going to see some reasonable amount of growth in the economy for the upcoming fiscal year. So basically good information, I guess, or good news. But as far as our local aid, our state aid that we're going to see in Northborough, our model carries 1%, and I don't, we might see 1.5%, especially based on these, very conservative numbers that they're focusing on. They do and will, as the year goes on, sometimes they'll modify that as the budget starts to go through the process. But for planning purposes, the first look at state aid we're going to get is going to be from the governor, and that's going to be based on the revenue consensus number that we have. So just an update for you on that. Okay?
Thank you, John. Any questions? No. All right. Anything else, John?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is the library budget presentation.
I have swag for you.
Oh, look at that. Wow, that might be influencing the panel.
Well, I can leave it here.
You can give it to him, I'm just kidding.
Oh, thank you.
I have lots of fun things that stay in there.
Thank you.
We can accept this.
Does everybody know Jen Brunel, our library director? I think you all met her. She was here last year.
And I am joined today by Michelle Rehill, who is the chair of the Board of Library Trustees. You can come sit right up front with me. So it was a good year for the library. We did see a sizable increase in the number of patrons who came to the library over our pre-pandemic total. So it was about a 14% increase. And put another way, about 80% of the town actively checked out at least one item from the library's collection over the last year. That doesn't necessarily reflect the total number of people that use the library, because there are a lot of things that you can do without a card, using the library space, attending a program, coming in for a meeting, using a computer or some of our databases. So that was a really impressive number. It was nice to see the numbers start to rebound after COVID. And it shouldn't be a surprise then that we actually set a record for total number of materials circulated last year. We had just over 200,000 items, almost 204,000 items that checked out. A lot of that was electronic materials, but a surprising increase in print books. So yay, print is still very much alive. That was about a 10% increase, so that was really exciting to see. We also noticed that people are definitely starting to gather in groups again. We had a slow start to the year with COVID. We had to cancel some programs, lower attendance and things like that. But as we really got moving, we offered 482 programs for ages 0 through however high you want to go. And we had about 13,000 people show up for those programs. So there's a chart in your materials that kind of shows you the number of programs that we've been offering year to year and the attendance. And you can see that even though we didn't offer 700 programs, which is what we were doing before the pandemic, the attendance is actually not far off from our previous totals. So with a full year of programming, we expect that we're gonna just shatter previous records. People are just so happy to come out and get back together with members of the community, and they're definitely congregating in the library. And all of our programs, I wanted to mention, all of our programming funds come from the Friends of the Library or through small community grants. So none of that is paid for out of our appropriations. And we are so thankful for our volunteers that work through the Friends to do our book sales, and to raise that money for us so we can offer those programs. Included in your packet, there are some flyers for upcoming programs because I couldn't, sorry, it's in the swag bag. There's a calendar of all of our children's programs. They offer 40 or 50 programs a month, so I didn't want to list them all here. You don't want to be here for 4 hours listening to that. We're also having painting tutorial and an art reception with local artist Lisa Hayes, offering CPR classes to the public in partnership with the Be Well Northborough initiative. The health department has been doing monthly Narcan trainings at the library. We have a new adult services librarian this year. We did have Deborah Hirsch retire after many years with us at the library. So our new librarian is Caitlin, and she is already busy working on new adult programming. She's got some craft programs lined up. She's gonna be working with the senior center to do some tech help, and lots more. So tons and tons of activity going on at the library. One of the most impactful accomplishments I think we had was the resource guide, which I did put a copy in your swag bags in case you didn't see it. That was a Be Well Northborough initiative that the library helped collaborate with all the other town departments that worked on that. Really a labor of love. It took us hours and hours of checking phone numbers, making sure URLs are correct, organizing everything. That was mailed to every address in Northborough. And we had a few extras that we put out at the town hall, the senior center, and the library. And I wanted to just briefly give you 2 examples of how that resource guide has impacted Northborough residents. The first one was from a woman who called on a Saturday evening that I was working. She called right before closing. She had been a Northborough resident who had been coming in fairly regularly to use the computers. She was updating her resume, looking for a job. That particular evening, she had called because she had lost the apartment she was living in and had to move out of state. And where she ended up, she did not feel comfortable. She didn't have access to a computer, and she was very emotional when she was on the phone with us. My staff member and I were able to give her several phone numbers to call to help her with her housing situation, and we convinced her that she should at least take the number for a mental health hotline because there were a lot of different things that were kind of going on. We wanted her to just kind of be able to clear her head and focus. She really needed, at that moment, quick, trusted information. And thanks to the resource guide, we were just able to just go to that section, get her the information. And she did call back later saying that she had found a better place, and that she had called the hotline and they were helping her. And so a very, very great success story in being able to help somebody through the resource guide. The second one came from a woman who attended a recent library event. I had copies of the resource guide out on a table in the room. And she came up and told me that her husband had recently been diagnosed with cancer, and his chemo treatments were making it hard for him to walk. And the insurance company told her it would be about 8 weeks for a wheelchair to be sent, which is pretty common. So she was browsing through the resource guide at one of his treatments and saw the Helping Hands entry and called them, and in 2 days was able to get a wheelchair for him to use until his permanent one came in, which, sorry, I'm not gonna cry. I did cry when she was in front of me. She was able to take him to Tower Hill. Christmas lights apparently are one of his favorite things, and they weren't gonna be able to go because he wasn't able to walk, but because they were able to get this wheelchair, she was able to take him. So she just wanted to express her gratitude for that. And that was all just because of the resource guide. So I just thought I would share those stories with you. It's something that we're really proud of, and we have every intention of continuing to keep it updated and available to residents in town. So our goals and initiatives this year don't outwardly look very exciting. It's a lot of looking at marketing, and it's really all about usability of the library's spaces, our website, our collections. We want to be able to get things out faster so that patrons don't have to wait as long. Our goal is to be able to get new books out the same day they're released in a bookstore. We want to reorganize our space and our collections so that people can find what they want a little bit easier. And, you know, some of our physical space needs to be kind of updated, because after the pandemic, we're noticing that people are using the library a little bit differently. We get a lot of people who work remotely, who get sick of the inside of their house, so they come to the library, and so they're looking for quiet, comfortable spaces to kind of spread out. We do get a lot of people doing Zoom interviews, Zoom tutoring, Zoom appointments, Zoom court, things like that. So just sort of like a different way of using the space than our traditional, what we had traditionally been seeing. So we ended up taking our computer lab, we moved the computers out into the main part of the floor, and we took that room and made it into a programming room and a quiet space. So now there's an additional room upstairs that's comfortable and quiet that we can also double to use for teen programming and some of our wellness programming that we're doing. So that's been a huge benefit to the library. Not a whole lot to say about the budget. If you're a glass half full kind of person, it's down 0.82% overall. It's really up about 4.15%.
Maybe Jen, if I can
If you
chime
would
in on
like
that.
to. Yeah?
Yeah, so one of the things you're going to hear about next week when DPW comes in, you know, we finally hired our facilities manager, and this is the budget cycle where we're creating an actual facilities department. So we're moving all of the building maintenance, custodial, repairs, all those lines out of the building. So you're going to hear the same story from fire, police, senior center, library, and this building. They're all moved centrally. So that's why these budgets, as you compare from year to year, they may be down, but then you're going to see a facilities budget now where all that is going to be located. But where Jen was going was controlling for that, the budget is actually up a little over 4%, and the primary reason for that is electricity and utility costs, as I'm sure everybody's seeing. The town municipal buildings participate in an aggregation contract we always have. That aggregation contract was renewed, but it's still at a much higher rate than the previous historically low rates that we had in the last contract that we had signed. So, so that's really it. That's the bulk of the change. Everything else is primarily maintenance contracts in terms of the books, materials, and things of that nature. If I may, through the chair, just for folks that may be at home that want to follow along, the documents that the committee has are actually on the committee's webpage. So we're broadcast live, and the documents, if you want to click in, you can download them. By way of orientation, for folks at home primarily, I know the committee knows this, but every budget that comes before you is in the same format. The first page has a mission statement, tells you what the department does, what their role and function is. There's an organizational chart specific for that department. And then, as Jen has been going through for you, talking about the initiatives and accomplishments from fiscal year 23, so the prior year that we're in right now. The year we're in right now is 23, and we're talking about a budget for 2024. So prior year accomplishments, and then the upcoming goals and objectives for fiscal 2024, the budget you're looking at here. And then what I just relayed to you, and Jen started on page 5-10, is one paragraph for every department that comes forward that tells you how much the budget's going up, why it's going up, and anything that is of significant change in the budget for this upcoming year. So, as you know, we're looking at basically a level service budget across the board for all of our departments. That doesn't mean a level funded budget. It means the budgets are going up amount that's necessary to maintain the current level of services. So in the case of the library, you're seeing a significant increase in their utilities because in order to maintain the building and keep it open the same hours, utility costs are up. So that's that explanation. After the significant budget changes, every department has a listing of basically programs and services. It's a nice little summary table of all the different activities or services that are provided by that department. And then, in this case, on page 5-11, we always provide a 5-year staffing table, so you can see what's happened in terms of staffing. And again, this is consistent for every department that appears before you. It's always kind to boards and committees when you see the exact same information, standardized the same way, in the same format, in the same order. So when the senior center comes up, she's going to walk you kind of through the same thing. And then last but not least, on page 5-12 of the library's budget are all of the line items in the various categories that you're used to seeing. And again, we give you 3 years of actual, the current fiscal 23 budget, the 23 6-month mark, and then what's being proposed for fiscal 2024. Okay? And again, every budget's organized that exact same way as they go through. So, I hope I did I steal all of your thunder now, Jen?
No, you said it much better than I could. Thank you for that. No, the only thing that I would add is that we're so happy with the facilities manager. He is amazing. He has freed up so much of our time, and we're so happy to be sort of turning the contracts and the management of the facilities over to him, because he knows way more about facilities management and HVACs and things like that than I do.
You're going to hear from him next week. He's going to join Scott Charpentier, the DPW director. But standardizing maintenance contracts, getting some economies of scale on these things, and somebody who knows what they're doing, tracking all of this stuff. We've already reaped some significant benefit from that. And we're getting away from a reactionary approach to building maintenance and much more proactive. And again, Jen is a phenomenal library director. She knows about as much as I do about boilers.
Maybe
and
less.
So having somebody who is focused on that for these facilities, you're probably going to hear an echoing of this when the senior center director comes up as well. But being able to have these things done by a professional has been our goal all along. This is the year we're going to realize that fully consolidated budget. So it means, at least in this cycle, things are going to move around a little bit. But overall, we're hitting our target number that we discussed at the financial trend meeting back in December. So
That's it from me. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
I have a comment and a question. I am very pleased to see your second goal, because I've had great difficulty getting hold of the Gale forecasts or finding out when events are and things like that. And while I'm barely computer literate, I can look on my computer, but I've not had any luck. And the other one is about item 4, complete reclassification. What do you mean by that? What are you going from what system to what system?
That's a great question. So currently, we're using the Dewey Decimal System, which within the industry really has not been able to keep up with some of the changes to information. There's no section really for computer apps, for example. It really just we've kind of outgrown that system. So a lot of public libraries are moving away from it. We are looking at using the BISAC classification system, which is basically, it's the bookstore model. It's a lot more adaptable. Their subjects are a lot more up to date given the current state of information, and they're adding new classifications every year and new subject headings. So it's a lot more flexible, a lot more adaptable, and the language has been updated to kind of reflect current understandings of cultures in the world. So that's what we're looking at doing.
How does that affect the information that is in the front, well, second or third page of a book that gives you a number? Is that going to be a different number from that, a more advanced system? I don't have a library book in my hand.
Cataloging and publication, does that include BISAC already?
I believe so. I believe it includes Library of Congress, Dewey, and
Yeah.
ISAC. So that information will already be, it will still be there.
And how will you use that in your classification, or do you?
So right now, everything, you would see on that page, you would see the Dewey number or something similar to it, and you would also see the BISAC subject headings. So we would just use those on the spine label and in our catalog, as opposed to the Dewey classification system.
Thank you.
Sure.
Tony?
Yes, so you mentioned it's a 4.15% budget for the library. Just for context, what is the overall budget for increase for the town?
Our target
schools?
that we discussed at the financial trend monitoring was 3.5%. So what you're seeing, I think you're going to see are departments that have facilities, Tony, are going to have a little bit more of an increase because of the electricity primarily, like electricity, fuel. So just means, that's overall, it's a 3.5, but some accounts are up, some are down.
Sure. Any other questions?
If I, through the chair, if I may, just more of a comment, just a comment. I just want to publicly thank Jen through all of the COVID. Jen was one of the leaders in our Be Well initiative. This is the town-wide wellness program. Put in a ton of hours, not just on that guide, but on programming. So what we saw was we had a cross-functional team with, it had a lot, all the departments were basically represented, but senior center, library, health, family services, police and fire were the primary ones. But as far as organizing the meetings and keeping everybody on task, Jen did a fantastic job. So the library during the pandemic became a real link for us in terms of just a place for community connection. Some of it was online, but as soon as people can get back and meeting, the place was bumping, as my daughter would say. So,
John?
yes.
In my early days, one of my slogans when raising support for a new library edition was that it was the only town department that you didn't need a crisis to go to.
There you go. But I do want to acknowledge Jen publicly for the great job she did, and the leadership she showed with that group. They all worked together, but Jen really was the one that kept us on task. So, thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to add, John stole some of my thunder on the thank you. I grew up in town and remember going to the library as a kid, so it's a wonderful place. I actually worked at the library through college. I don't want to say I'm a library geek, but I know my way around the library. So, and it's also, thank you for sharing those stories. It's great to hear that it's not only a place to go for information, that it's also a really important part of the community and gives back to the community in a lot of different ways, which is just great to hear. And then it's also great to hear about the facilities budget. And I think the real value with the facilities budget, in addition to having somebody that knows their way around a boiler, is it frees up the people who we hired to do specific roles to focus on the roles where their expertise lies. I don't know if you ever took any courses on boiler maintenance. I would assume you've done some significant studies in being a library director, so much better to spend your time, helping people get wheelchairs for Christmas lights.
Exactly.
And then lastly, the Dewey Decimal System. It's actually really interesting how they came up with the Dewey Decimal System, but there's a lot of bias that's built into the Dewey Decimal System and a lot of reasons why it's being replaced across the country, so it's exciting to hear that that's being done.
Seen a whole new side of you tonight, Tim. You are excited about the Dewey Decimal System.
Yeah, if you look at, for example, the 200s, which is the religion section, 200 through about 295 is Christian religions, and then the rest is everything else. So then this decimal points go way out because there's so many more books that are, 296.15126.1A. So
Yeah,
it's time to kind of move away from that.
yeah, and how evident that is in others, but that's
Right.
the example I was actually thinking of, so. And lastly, it's really unfortunate to see the $75,000 in there for utilities. That electric bump is just a killer for everybody, so. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
So next on our agenda is the senior center budget presentation.
Everybody know Kendra Spaldetta, our still new senior center director, and Adrian Koss is the chair of the Council on Aging.
So I've included our February newsletter for everyone, and I should introduce myself. I'm Kendra Feldetta. I've been here for, I think, going on 9 months now. I started last May. And of course, this time with Adrian. But I have included, it's our most current newsletter, so our February newsletter. On the front for everyone, there is a different note from someone that was at the Senior Center today, talking about why they appreciate going to the Senior Center. I have also included our menu for our bistro, and then an example of 2 posters of activities that we have going on at this time. So we've had a busy year. Overall, we're up 17% for daily attendance at the Senior Center. We monitor that using My Senior Center, which is a computer program specific to senior centers. It basically gives everybody, almost like if you go to the gym, that little swipe in tag that you have to get in. It's the same sort of thing. Everyone is attached to a number. So they swipe in when they get there, and then there's a touch screen that allows them to select what classes they're there for. So whether they're there for lunch or billiards or a whole host of things. So that has been actually really helpful to keep track. Not all senior centers offer a tech program like that, but that is something that we've been really utilizing pretty heavily this year. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the cultural programming that we've been doing at the Senior Center. That includes working with the India Society. We hosted a Diwali celebration in November, which was wonderful. We have an event planned in April with B'nai Shalom, which is the synagogue in Westboro. So they are coming to talk about Jewish culture, Jewish history, and Jewish practices. We're looking forward to hosting them. And then in May, it is Asian Heritage Month. So we are working with the Chinese American Society of Northborough Southborough. They will be coming and doing a Chinese lantern making, a Chinese lantern painting, and a Chinese brush painting class with us, which we are very excited about working with them. And we have plans for June. We have been looking into organizations we can partner with for LGBTQ History Month. Something that we're kind of looking for is a way for seniors to maybe have conversations that they're not used to having with younger grandchildren or children, and to sort of bridge a gap where there might be some language differences and some social differences, to maybe bring some of our seniors up into a more modern way of speaking or what have you. We have been doing a lot with Be Well, so we hosted several emotional support programs, which it was a group therapy setting. They met with a licensed therapist, and they talked about specifically more trends about being lonely during COVID, people who aren't able to see family anymore, people who might have lost loved ones during that time, and what isolation really did. There is a lot of studies out there that show that COVID was really detrimental to the mental health of specifically the elderly. So we addressed that, and we also have a partnership with the YMCA in Westboro now, which is very exciting. And so through Be Well, we were able to secure funds. We allow up to 6 seniors to participate in water aerobics classes twice a week. We have a rotating list. It is free to those that participate, and the YMCA in turn only charges our Be Well account $5 per person per class, which is at a greatly discounted rate considering I think it's $15 for a senior citizen to take that class normally. And so we secured funding. We should be able to run that program without any additional cost, aside from the Be Well funding for the next 2 to 3 years, depending on the success of the program, which is very exciting. And it's actually one of our most popular. We have a very, very long wait list for that class. It's one of our most popular offerings, which is very exciting. And also through that Be Well initiative, we were able to offer something called Dynamic Aging, which is a fitness and educational class that talks about ways to treat your body to preserve your health. So it talks about proper posture, proper footwear, stretching, and that was through a local town here in, I know, yeah, you just sit up straight. That was through a local gym here in town, and it was taught by someone who specifies in elderly fitness, and it was really well received, and it was very exciting. So I guess a little bit more on the money side, our budget is also up for electricity costs, similar to the library, but we also utilized Sean, the facilities manager, so he is going to take over that part of the budget that's going to be separate from us, and that has actually been a really big help, particularly kind of the same thing as Jen. We have the geothermal system. I have no idea what's going on with it. There's a lot of levers and pumps and noises that come out of that room.
Just so as you look at the budget again, overall the budget's showing that it's down 8.75%. Again, all those expenses are moving to that centralized facility budget. So senior center is a little bit different from our other facilities. When we built it, it doesn't burn any fossil fuels. It's a geothermal system, which means it's all electric, which means its costs are even more higher increase to run it. So when you control for taking the maintenance costs and moving over, the senior center budget is up about a little over 9% right now. It's all electricity. That's really what it is. Just to come back on the facilities manager, again, this is a very complicated system. A lot of moving parts to 1,500-foot deep wells, and Kendra's an excellent senior center director. She does amazing programming, but we need somebody to take care of that building. The 2 biggest issues we had when Kelly Burke was here, our long-term director, was just constantly, it's the building, being responsible for that building and that complex system, and being able to take that aside. The compromise I'd made with the previous director was, since I'm local, when the alarm would go off at 2 in the morning, I was the one getting the call. I'm happy to say the facilities manager is getting the call now when that happens. But again, it's working really well. Overall, the budget is stable with the exception of those energy costs. That's what we're having to deal with, which I think everybody's dealing with. But just, can you just take a moment and just focus on bullet number 2 of the accomplishments? It's on page 5-2. I just think it's important to see that people realize the number of individual folks that the senior center is actually touching.
So in fiscal year 23, which started July 1st, we have already seen 12,665 people through our doors, which is, like I said, we're up 17% over last year for daily attendance. And that is only counting the people who swipe in when they are supposed to. So one of our big goals for next year is to really make sure that we're sort of hammering into people, when you walk in the door, please swipe in so we know you're here. But we are busy at any given day. If you go up at noon, our bistro has 40 to 50 people having lunch, which is really wonderful. It's what we like. We like to be busy. So it's great. We've had some success trying to bring the town and involve some of the younger folks in what's going on at the senior center. I think it's really helpful for the seniors to interact with, to have the town sort of interact with the senior center and for it not to be sort of an off on its own kind of organization. So something that we decided to do this year, we hosted a trunk or treat. So we had 250 children and families come and do a trunk or treat. We had some involvement with other town departments. It was really nice. The fire department was there, the police department was there, rec was there. And so it was just a really nice collaborative effort for people to really see that the senior center is lively and vibrant and exciting. We have been working a lot with Algonquin. We had their National Honor Society kids come. They did holiday gift wrapping for seniors. So the Friends of the Senior Center donated the supplies, and the Algonquin kids did their best to wrap gifts for the holidays, which was very nice. We have the Proctor School. They came and sang holiday songs with our dementia group, which was very exciting. And we have the Fitzgerald School who's coming to make St. Patrick's Day decorations that they will be dropping off in March. So we sort of have broadened the horizons of the senior center and are trying to open it up to different populations. And there are a lot of grandparents that are raising their grandchildren at this time. And there's also, we saw a big switch, especially during COVID. People who are working from home are looking for ways to get their young children out of the house. So a lot of that does fall to grandparents. So we've been trying to change up our typical sort of what we offer. We've added, since July, we've added 31 new programs, and that is not including, I think, the roughly 50 that we already offered, so the 31 is on top of what we were already offering. And we've been using My Senior Center to monitor what is successful, what's not successful. That way we're able to sort of cut classes that might have really low enrollment, or we're able to add, right now chair yoga is very, very popular, so we were able to sort of add another class with the yoga instructor who's very popular. So we're able to monitor those trends and adjust accordingly, which is very nice. But I think...
Just one comment, as we talk about each year, we, make enhancements and tweaks to the budget. One of the things at the Government Finance Officers Association, this is the group that runs the Distinguished Budget Award, there's a very heavy focus now on performance measures and quantifiable statistics. So we're transitioning to that now, especially some of our newer department heads. So we're trying to start, and again, we're struggling. We want to make sure that it's useful and it's concise, but getting some numbers around things like programming, like the number of programs, the number of participants that are actually, and the number of distinct users that are coming into these. I think that's helpful information to get a sense of where we're trending. But what we're seeing is post-COVID is a really strong desire of people for a sense of community and to physically gather. So library, and the senior center are two of our community spaces, and we've been lucky with this Be Well initiative and the collaboration between the departments. What they've done is they've looked at programming holistically for the town, so they're not cannibalizing on each other. They're not both running duplication in terms of services, and they're trying to spread it around so people can move around the community, see the different facilities, and get exposure. So it's worked really well. We hope to be tracking and reporting that in a consistent manner from year to year. More along the lines, you saw the chart that Jen Brunell, Library Director, is showing you the programs, but then also what's happening with participation. Clearly, we had a dip with COVID. Things were closed. People were hesitant to come back out, but it's really picking up again, and this physical space, as much as Zoom is effective in getting people communicating, there's no replacement for the physical space, especially for seniors. We built that building so they can physically gather and have a sense of community, and I think Kendra's doing a great job of fully utilizing that building. So it's busy. Again, you should get up there. If you have a chance, stop in, have lunch at the bistro or dinner on, what night are we serving dinner? We're not serving
Nope.
dinner. That's still one of the things we want to bring back, Tuesday night dinners. I missed the pot roast myself. But stop up there and see what's going on. Every room in that building has something going on it all day. So you should go up and check it out.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you. Congratulations on the 17% increase. That is tremendous. I know how hard Adrian has worked over the last, countless years on marketing the facility to the town and and trying to get people aware of all the wonderful services and that are going on up there.
I mean, when we started, it looked out and the parking lot was always empty, and you said, where is it, where are they? Now you can't find a parking space.
Yeah, yeah, good problems to have. So congratulations on that. That's really wonderful. And again, the facilities manager, I remember when I was on the Council on Aging and the amount of effort that Kelly Burke had put into running that.
I feel bad about that as I look back, to be honest.
So not having that on everybody's plate at the senior center is a nice addition. And then on some of the cultural programming, I don't know if you do any work with the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee in town.
Yeah, we have, one of the members of our COA is on the Diversity Inclusion Board.
Okay, perfect. That's great. Any questions? No questions?
We realize outside of utilities, there's not a lot happening in these budgets, but I think it's important for people to get a sense of, it's not about the numbers, it's about what we're getting and accomplishing and the outreach that's being achieved in these departments, because they really have done an excellent job, especially in the past year.
Yeah.
I would just like to say, John talked about the facilities manager. Kinder came in after as director, as another director, and then we had an interim director in between. And while the interim director was there, in between two of the directors, she said to me, having Sean there, doing the facilities was the best thing she could have, because she spent more time doing the facilities than doing the program. It just took too much time. And they don't have the I mean, we don't expect Kinder to know how the furnace works or how the heat pumps work, but we now have somebody that can do it. And it's amazing. It released time for the director.
You're seeing the increase in programming because the directors, the people that are responsible for these buildings are focusing on the services they're supposed to be providing instead of worrying about the maintenance of the building. So it took me a long time to get that position, but it is, it's well worth it.
Yeah, yeah. And one thing on the utilities too, when I go through the budgeting process outside of the town, one thing I always try to remind myself, utilities is one of those things that's just completely out of your control. Like you can't, the costs go up and it's not like you can use less electricity at the facility to significantly reduce the cost. It's almost, it's an expense that's mostly out of your control, so. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the Health Department budget presentation.
So this is not a HIPAA violation because she gave me permission to disclose this, but our health director, ironically enough, has COVID. So I told her she could skip the in-person meeting tonight and that I would handle her budget presentation for her. But if you know Kristen Black, our health agent, she is a ball of fire and nobody can keep up with her. She's done a phenomenal job for us. So she did send you a memo, which is on top of the budget handout for her department, basically summarizing some of the key things that they've achieved over the last year. The biggest piece of what has happened in our health department during the pandemic, Northborough's Board of Health and Health Department actually became the hub for the pandemic response for our region. And Kristen Black in particular took the lead on the Public Health Excellent Grant Program. We received, under the application that Kristen put together, $300,000 a year of grant for public health. Now that's shared with several neighboring communities. It's Boylston, Southborough, and Westborough. Also received a $160,000 a year grant for contact tracing and case investigation. There hasn't been a lot of that, and the state's been pretty lenient with how that's been used. But as you can see on the front page of her memo at the bottom, so through those grants, we've hired an epidemiologist, which is budgeted at 32 hours a week, which is 0.8 of a full-time equivalent, a 40-hour-week health agent, who's primarily doing food inspection work, and again, these are shared positions with these other communities. And a big winner was the contracted public health nurses. Actually, I meant to have Kendra mention that. So we have now these public health nurses, 2 full-time equivalents, and one of them spends a significant amount of time up at the senior center running blood pressure clinics, doing some home visits, using them. We've been able to get flu vaccines to seniors and who are maybe homebound, but having the nurse at the senior center available and doing health checks has been a great enhancement to that facility. We actually have a room at the senior center that was built for this purpose, and now we're realizing that it's being used. She mentioned over 1,000 COVID vaccines, 500 flu vaccines between September and December of 2022. So these are held at the senior center. We did a drive, those of you that went through a drive-through flu clinic at the high school. It was amazing. You run through, the tents were up, you literally stick your arm out the window, they give you your shot, you don't even have to get out of the car. Amazingly efficient and amazingly innovative in that we're making these services as painful and as efficient as we can.
Painful?
What's that?
Did you say painful?
Pain, did I say painful? Is that a
Painless.
Freudian slip? It's painless. It's painful. I'm a baby when it comes to getting shots, so I'm not a good one to ask. But no, it's painless and it's efficient. And you know, if you remember during the pandemic, Northborough was the one that coordinated the regional vaccination clinics. And that's impressive because we were the coordinating agency for communities that were significantly larger for us with a lot more staff. And it just speaks to Kristen's ability to be productive and to frankly collaborate and work with other folks. She's also been amazing in terms of the Be Well Northborough initiatives that we've talked about, and you've seen the resource brochure. She was key in putting that together as well. The other thing is the health department now is been taking the lead on the Northborough Southborough Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition. This group is now known as Encompass, and they're working with the epidemiologists, and they're writing a drug-free community grant for the coalition that could provide $125,000 a year annually over the next 5 years. The idea is to sort of take that coupled with the opioid settlement money that we have and do a really coordinated, concerted effort working with Southborough, the regional high school, and our Board of Health. In terms of the budget, the numbers, if you were to look on page 3-28 of the health budget, you'll see that overall the budget is decreasing $16,000, a little over $16,000 or 7%. Again, this is a reallocation. So I'll go back 3 health directors ago when the health director was insisting that under Mass General Law, the plumbing inspectors technically fall under the Board of Health. On a day-to-day basis, the plumbing inspector is supervised by the building department, so they share an office. Kristen finally said, nobody does that anymore, so that part-time plumbing inspector is now moved over under building, and that's the reason for the decrease in her budget. Otherwise, it's a level service budget. One of the things that the grants are predicated on is that the grants cannot supplant your existing budget. So in other words, you can't get that $300,000 grant and reduce your health budget. It has to be in addition. The whole point of these grants is to expand the public health services into the region. And so that's why her budget is basically flat. So when you control for moving the plumbing inspector under building where it arguably belongs, overall the budget's up $923 or 0.4%. So again, Kristen has done a phenomenal job of expanding. All this stuff that has been accomplished has all been accomplished through outside funds, state grants or Metro West Foundation grants. Kristen worked with the schools to get a $50,000 grant to get counselors into the schools for the children during the pandemic. That's still ongoing. She's just very efficient and effective at chasing down money. Jason Little, the finance director, and myself, sometimes we have a little bit of trouble keeping up with her, to be honest with you, because all of this stuff requires, and Becca as well, requires hiring all of this additional staff and agreeing contracts for services, intermunicipal agreements with the towns that we're sharing these services with. So it's it's a pretty significant effort, but the winners on the other side of this are the Northborough residents, because again, when you control and you're the hub, I won't say that we get priority, but if you want to get a vaccine and you're in Northborough, you got that vaccine. There was no reason not to get it, or that booster shot. So sometimes we would go live a little bit early, allow people to get. The other thing too is they would contact seniors, walk them through, get them logged in. Very, very high level of service during the pandemic for our folks. I would just, one thing that we did make a change, if you go to page 3-29, Becca added this into the budget document. And we do this in the senior center, and we do it in a couple different places. When you look at what is the staffing count for a department, we talk about that as the general fund. In other words, this is what the tax dollars are supporting. So on the top of page 3-29, you can see that there's two full-time equivalents. There's a health director, which is Kristen Black, and there's an administrative assistant. There's only two people on the taxes that the taxpayers of Northborough are directly paying for. The table on the bottom shows you the full-time health agent, the epidemiologist, and the public health nurses that are down there. Those are all funded by grants. I'm always careful when we do seek grants, because oftentimes it's an introductory process where they give you the grant and it's good for a year or two, and then you have to then absorb the cost to sustain the services. This Public Health Excellent Grant was an initiative from the Department of Public Health, and they want towns to work together. During the pandemic, no one community could really muster a response for vaccination clinics and the outreach that we had to do. They want that collaboration. That $300,000 grant, they're telling us, is going to be good for 10 years. 10 years. So all of this additional staff is not going to disappear next year. The nurses that we now have up at the senior center doing blood pressure checks and home visits, they're not going to disappear. The permanent health agent that we have, that person's not going to disappear. The only one that is going to disappear is going to be the epidemiologist, because that was a separate grant. They wanted us to hire an epidemiologist to do contact tracing. When it got to the point where nobody was really doing contact tracing anymore, they let us keep the grant, and now she's doing that person is doing grant writing and other coordination and programmatic work for the town in the meantime. So we're squeezing everything that we can out of these grants. But the good news is the foundation, that $300,000 a year grant, is supposed to be here for at least the next 9 to 10 years. So we're trying to expand, but not too fast and in a sustainable way. And I think if we let Kristen go, she would take over Central Massachusetts, because she just has that kind of energy. If any of you have had any interactions with her. But I think what we have built here as a model is appropriate in size and, more importantly, sustainable. And again, it's not drawing on the tax dollars from Northborough. These are grant funds that we're getting from the state to do all this work. So again, she's done a great job. And overall, her budget is up, a few $100, and yet we more than doubled the services that are being offered. So happy to answer any questions you may have. I'm very familiar with it's not a complicated budget, but it's really the grants that is the piece that needed to be explained.
Yeah, she is worth her weight in gold.
She's done a phenomenal job.
She's great.
Everybody keeps trying to steal her from us, so I've been trying to hang on to her. So I think the state is trying to get her to move to the state level a few times. Luckily, for personal reasons, this works for her, so we're happy to keep her.
Any questions?
My one question is why we need an epidemiologist, and you answered that.
They gave us they gave us $160,000 a year contact tracing grant with the requirement that we hire an epidemiologist.
Yeah.
So now we have an epidemiologist, but not much contact tracing. But again, they really want us to be working with other towns and doing regional work. So as long as we're doing that with the position, they're allowing that under the modified grant, which has actually worked out really well. A lot of the Be Well Northborough stuff, this individual's been actually working on that stuff.
Okay.
John, I don't have a clear picture of what an epidemiologist is. What kind of background is it?
It's infectious diseases, basically, tracking infectious diseases.
So is this a bachelor's, a master's, some kind of a
The person we have
certificate?
is working on her PhD.
Okay.
So it's somebody who is in school and is fantastic, and we were able to get her to work because it's a part-time grant-funded position.
Yeah.
So those are sometimes tough to fill with really qualified people, but if if they're in graduate school and they're looking for 20 hours a week, boys, and it's in their field, and it makes them look, it's good for the resume, it's a perfect match. And so it just lined up beautifully for us, and it's been a really good, it's been a good pairing for us. So, good people attract, good people. So Kristen's been able to really bring some nice folks into the organization for us. That's all I have. I can answer any questions you may have. It's all the details of the grants is laid out in the attached memo as well, so.
No questions? Thank you, John. Next on the agenda is review of the preliminary free cash plan and draft of the fiscal year 2024 capital budget.
So this is information you've received in the past by email. Just because I'm going to speak to it, I wanted you to be able to have the document in front of you. So December 2nd, 2022, when we close out the fiscal year, we have budget surplus if we've done our job correctly. You never want to be in the negative. And so part under our free cash policy, the town administrator is required to put together a free cash plan into how we're going to use those funds that complies with that policy. So on the bottom of page 2 of the memo, there's a table that says preliminary 2024 free cash plan. Again, this may look familiar to you because we discussed it at the financial trend monitoring and forecasting meeting back in December. But essentially, at the close of fiscal 2022, so the year that we ended, we had $2.44 million in free cash. And the plan, the preliminary free cash plan that I showed back in December is basically the one that's here, is to use $175,000 of that as the Appropriations Committee. This is your emergency reserve fund. So during the course of the year, if something happens, a storm, snow and ice overdrafts, unexpected repairs that need to be made, we don't have to hold a special town meeting. This committee, by statute, has the authority to have that emergency reserve fund, and that is at $175,000 as it has been for years. We always roll forward $500,000 into the next operating budget, which is less than 1%. We cap by policy less than 1% of the one-time revenues in the operating budget. We're putting $200,000 into the stabilization fund. This is our rainy day fund, our financial reserves. In accordance with our policy, we want to be between 5 and 10%. The reality is we want to have between 8 and 10% of financial reserves. That's what the bond rating agencies want to see us at. So as our budgets grow each year and our reserves don't, it becomes a smaller percentage. So we really want to add each year a couple $100,000 into our financial reserves to maintain that at around 8%. That's about where we are right now, and that's about where we'll be with this contribution. And then last but not least, which is a lead into the other piece of this particular agenda item, is the fiscal 2024 capital projects. So under the free cash plan here, after those items that we just discussed, leaves a little over $1 million for pay-as-you-go capital. So the balance of this document talks about all, it gives you a 30-year history of free cash, what it is and all of that. You've seen this every year for the last 10 years, but it is updated, and it was previously distributed to you. I'm not going to spend any time on the balance of the memo unless somebody has a question on anything that's included in there. And again, this is on the website, and it's a great document when people serve on a board or committee because it explains the whole history of free cash, the policy, why we limit the amount that we use in the operating budget, its relevance to our bond rating and all of those things. So that's all included in there. But it is a perfect lead into the second piece, and this is a one-page sheet here, and it says at the top, draft FY 2024 capital budget for discussion purposes. And this is tomorrow night, the Financial Planning Committee's meeting. They had begun their meetings to review the capital projects that will go forward to town meeting. So just briefly, walking you through this, these are the anticipated projects. So 3 police cruisers, as you know, we replaced 3 police vehicles one year to the next, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2. And essentially, we rotate every 5 years on an ongoing basis. The vehicles are being renewed. We delayed during the pandemic 1 police cruiser, which is why this year is another 3-year vehicle year, and then next year will be 2, and then 3, 2, 3. So we're back. We get back on schedule, and that's $190,000. One of the things you'll hear from the departments when they meet with you is the vehicle prices, like many other things, are escalating very rapidly. If you tried to purchase a vehicle lately, it's often much higher than the manufacturer's suggested retail. The next project, and by the way, the cruisers would be paid for using free cash, so no additional tax impact. The next project is the police station exterior repairs and painting at $70,000. Yes, that is an exorbitant number, and yes, it's because the procurement laws require us to pay prevailing wages. Just in preparation for the meeting, I asked our facilities manager to pull the rate sheets for painters under prevailing wages. A painter coming to paint our police station will be making between $75 and $80 an hour under prevailing wages. We have a local.
Nobody needs to write down his name because they need a painter.
We have no choice in this. If you know the police station, it's basically, it's a large house. And I don't know anybody that lives in a large house like that will cost $70,000 to paint it. There are some trim repair work that's in here, but the majority of this cost is for the painting. The last time we did this, it was a $50,000 project to paint the building. We were able to get the sheriff's inmates to come and do it for the price of food and paint. That program is no longer in place anymore because of COVID, and we have been waiting. We actually delayed this project 1 more year in the hopes that would come back. And as of this week, they're still not letting the inmates out to do this type of work because they're worried they're going to get exposed to COVID and bring it back into the facility. So it has to move forward.
Okay, just a quick question on that.
Yes.
I'm sure you guys have thought of this, but Assabet does all the work around town, and
Yeah.
I'm sure
Assabet
you
was
thought of it. But
No, that's a great, Assabet was our first stop. The issue is they're only allowed to work upwards of 2 stories. The back of the building is 3 stories. It's too high for them, basically. The nature of the building and the structure is beyond what they allow the students to do. So we've thought about trying to bring them in to have them do parts of the building that are lower, but again, it's tough to schedule that. But yeah, it's the free, the inmates, then Assabet, and then we have to pay. So the next item down here is the replacement of engine 1. This is a $900,000 fire engine. That is in the plan requiring replacement. And then we've got roadway maintenance in DPW, several vehicles, replacement of the installation of a tight tank down at the highway garage when we wash the trucks. Right now, the salt goes into the drain goes into the septic field. DEP doesn't like that, so they want us to install a tight tank. And then we have the 15-ton dump truck. This is a new truck in the Water and Sewer Division that would be paid for out of the enterprise, so no additional tax impact. And then SCADA, this is our monitoring for our water and sewer infrastructure. Scott, and again, Scott will talk about this when he comes at your meeting next week, but essentially, we were able to get a $491,000 federal grant to do the last phase to get all of our pump stations connected into this standalone system that is, in part, it's a cyber security. It's not connected to the internet, it's only connected internally to the system, allows us to monitor everything in a secure manner. But this is out of fund balance from the enterprise fund, $125,000, that's our matching grant. That allows us to get $491,000 of grant funds to do that project. And then as far as the K-8 schools, we have the Proctor School flat roof replacement at $1.7 million and replacement of the back walkway, the cement walkway in the back of the Z school at $40,000. So those are the projects, and again, you'll hear more about those projects as when those departments come to go over their operating budget, they'll talk in detail about the capital. The reason why this is in your packet tonight is, one, when we have a draft, we like to share it. So these are the projects that will go to town meeting in April of 2023 this year. So if you look to the right now, it shows funding sources. So we have $4,530,000 worth of capital projects that need to come forward. We have a little over $1 million in free cash. So one of the proposals going back to March of last year was to use some of the American Rescue Plan Act funding to take care of some of these medium-sized capital projects. Because again, we generate on a pay-as-you-go basis, $1 million, $1.5 million where we replace cruisers, dump trucks, small building repairs, maintenance, things of that nature, so we don't have to issue bonds. Then you have big projects like the fire station. You're gonna issue bonds for that. Then you have these medium-sized, like a roof for 1.7. Clearly, we can't pay cash for that. So, or a $900,000 fire engine. You can finance it. The last couple that we bought, the tower truck, the big tower, the $1 million tower truck, we bought with mitigation funds when the mall was built. They gave us money to pay for the truck. The last engine was about $688,000. We were able to pay cash for that with free cash that was 1 year because we had that money. The problem is, as the economy, we talked about in the beginning, the economy is still improving, but the growth isn't there, which means our budgets are going to be tighter. You know, the revenues aren't growing, the budgets are being pushed up with the utility expenses, and so when we finish the fiscal year, you know, we're not going to have large surpluses. So the proposal was that ARPA funds could be used to take these 3 projects that otherwise would have to be financed with debt sort of off the table. And if you take those out of the 6-year capital plan, it's much more, not entirely feasible, but much more likely that we're going to be able to pay most on a pay-as-you-go basis as we've been able to do since fiscal 12. Just keep in mind, outside of a couple of large, bridge or culvert replacements, we've been able to pay cash for all of our trucks and cruisers and equipment replacements, which means, we haven't had to issue debt, so there's no additional tax impact. When the pandemic hit, we postponed some capital, and then as budgets got tighter, we didn't have as much free cash like this year, and so what we're seeing is a bunching up of some of this capital stuff in the next couple of years. So the proposal was to use potentially ARPA funds, American Rescue Plan Act funds. The town received a little over $4.5 million of these funds. We're in possession of those funds right now. And if and those funds are under control of the Board of Selectmen, that they don't need to go to town meeting, it doesn't need any voter approval. It was designed to be a grant from the U.S. Treasury Department so that municipalities could immediately use those funds to deal with any issues that they were dealing with COVID. Northborough was very successful, as I just said a moment ago, getting grants to take care of vaccination clinics and outreach and counselors. And so we didn't have to spend that money on direct COVID responses. So we have used some of the funds, and it starts to lead into the next agenda item. But before that, through the chair, I don't know if anybody has any questions about the draft capital budget that would go to town meeting. So this is a suggested funding plan. The three projects, the engine, the DPW tight tank, and the Proctor roof, if not funded by ARPA, we need to issue debt for those. None of those projects can wait. They have to be done.
So next on the agenda is a discussion regarding recommendations for American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA fiscal year 2024 spending options. John?
So again, we've done a few iterations. I included a memo that was provided back on June 15th of 2022. At that point, the Board of Selectmen wanted to do a listening session, see what community thoughts were on how ARPA funds might be spent. The staff put together a memo with projects and items that we were aware of. The three that I just discussed were the three main ones that were brought forward. The board then has been working on a spending plan. The issue that we face right now is that we're out of time here, at least for the upcoming fiscal 2024 budget. So this decision needs to be made at least on these three projects. Are we going to use ARPA funds for those three large projects, or are we going to finance them with debt? So that's on the agenda for the board for the select board to discuss at their meeting on Monday. But in terms of the memo, let me just walk you through, if I can. And this is the memo dated February 7th. On the front, you can see the front table shows the ARPA funds that we've received, $4,516,184. On the second page, you can see the things that we have spent ARPA funding on to date. The Proctor roof came forward. It needs to be replaced. The board released $38,000 to address some immediate issues to try to buy us some time. So $38,000 to deal with some drainage and ponding of water on the roof. We had a couple projects that were out to bid, the Assabet Park and the pickleball courts. Those got caught in the supply chain issues. And so price escalation hit those projects. And so we had a couple of change orders there where they were running out of funding. So the board released $20,000 for the Assabet Park. That project was over $500,000 to replace fencing. And then in the pickleball court, there were benches and some gates and stuff that were alternates that the bids came in higher because of supply chain issues and escalation. So the board released $18,000. So those projects could be built as originally bid and conceived of. You heard tonight from both the senior center director as well as the library director about the Be Well Northborough. This was the townwide wellness initiative. They allocated $100,000 for that program, and those funds are largely expended and the programming accomplished. And then they had originally authorized $100,000 for the Housing Authority project, and we had released those funds in anticipation of getting a state grant. The state grant didn't materialize, so that project got scuttled. And then most recently, at their meeting on November 7th, the board released $15,000 for the Community Meals Program. This is the free meal program that is run by the interfaith clergy. And so donations have been down, usership was up, and so the board used some funding to bolster that program through the balance of the year. So when you account for all those, the money that's been expended to date, there's still $4,325,184 left in ARPA funds. Now, at the bottom of page 2, I try to give you a brief summary of what's happening at the state level for ARPA, but the state has been a bit of a mess in this regard because they had a $4 billion spending plan that they brought forward only to find out that they had to return over $3 billion to the taxpayers because there was a law, it's called 62F, which basically says it pegs the amount that the taxes can go up to, cost of living increases for employees. And basically, when the economy came back, the revenues came booming back, and under that law, which is from 1986, it's only been implemented once before, so nobody remembered it. They had to turn back $3 billion. So their whole plan, and part of their original plan was they were going to take some of their ARPA funds and just distribute it to municipalities with no strings attached. All that's been scuttled. And so most recently, the outgoing, or gone now, Governor Charlie Baker signed a $3.7 billion spending package. It went back and forth. The bottom line is they used a little bit of ARPA funding, but the state is still sitting on $1.75 billion of their ARPA, and we don't know how they're going to use it. Because now we have a new, the Healy-Driscoll administration's coming in. They haven't given any clue as to what they're going to do. So that ARPA funding, because of that crazy law, stopped their plans in track. They had to come back, relook at what the plan was going to be. Governor Baker then put something out, but they're still sitting on the large majority of that money. So in all of the stuff that they've done, they've used about $510 million of their ARPA funds, leaving $1.75 billion. So everybody keeps asking me, what's the state doing with their money? What's the state doing with their money? And we don't necessarily know yet.
So does that mean there's a possibility that that 1.75 could be distributed to municipalities, or will it be used for state projects?
Probably both. More than likely, the state will use those funds to bolster up existing programs. There's been a lot of the money has gone to housing programs, statewide food security, housing security type programs. Those are the things the human services needs. That's where they focused on initially. We've been hopeful that they'll flow this money through a lot of the existing grant programs that they already have, like the Chapter 90 funding, transportation funding, green communities, municipal vulnerability, all of which we participate in, complete streets, but it's yet to be seen, how it's ultimately is going to filter down through to us. So, as is often the case with the state, a lot of their spending is focused on communities and districts in need.
Mm-hmm.
Arguable as it should be. The problem with Northborough is we're well off enough and we are financially secure enough that often we fall into that middle ground where we don't qualify for a lot of these grant programs that are offered, or they're not relevant to us.
Mhm.
We don't have a large homeless population. We don't have census tract districts with people who are disenfranchised. You don't have a lot of that. We don't have much of that in Northborough. So that's where a lot of their focus is at. We're hopeful that some of this will flow through, as I said, the existing infrastructure programs, and we're watching all that. We'll participate in any of those that become available. But that's the update on the staff, on the state piece of it. On page 3 is the Northborough Capital Improvement Plan. The issue that we have right now is, like I said, in order to complete the capital budget, the warrant for town meeting, and the operating budget, we need to know if any of the ARPA funds that Northborough's received are going to be applied to any of these 3 specific projects. that we've been talking about since March of last year as potential recipients of, for ARPA. And again, the philosophy here is the free cash pays for a lot of the smaller projects. You know, the larger ones you're gonna bond, but you always have a few of these sort of medium-sized ones. If I have $1 million in free cash to work with in total for fiscal 2024, the Proctor roof is 1.7 million, you know, the engine is 900,000, you know what I mean? Like, so we either need to issue debt for those projects or use available funds. The projects are, the balance of the memo talks about those 3 projects. A little bit of an update, if you remember, if you look back to the June 15th memo on ARPA that I put together, the proposal was to use about $800,000 towards the Proctor roof. At the time, we were hopeful that we would get a Massachusetts School Building Authority grant for about 45% of the cost of the roof. If you remember when we did Lincoln Street building project, Lincoln Street roof before the full building project, the MSBA program pays roughly 45–50% of building and roof repairs, boilers, and things of that nature. So on February 28th, Board of Selectmen authorized the superintendent to submit to that. Unfortunately, we received, back in October, MSBA said, we have a long list of roofs, yours isn't old enough, so no, you're not gonna get a grant in this cycle. And then about a month, not even a month, a couple weeks later, November 2nd, MSBA issued a press release that said they're suspending their grant program for the next cycle after this one. And the reason for that was, MSBA is the program that every municipality participates in to do their school building projects, and it pays, you know, it pays through a range. If, you know, some communities will see 60–70% of the school paid for by the state, depending on the needs of the community. However, they put all these projects, you know, each year they approve all these projects, so they have a bunch of projects that are currently under construction and projects that are out to bid. But what happened? Supply chain, escalation. So all these projects that they had already approved the budgets for were coming in way over budget. So what MSBA did with this press release that in November of last year, of 2022, they said until we get a handle on this, no more grants. So the bottom line is we were hoping to get about $800,000 for this roof under the grant program. Excuse me. Not only are we not getting that grant, but that program has been suspended for at least another year. So 2 grant cycles, no chance of getting the roof. This roof needs to be replaced. It can't be delayed anymore. It's a bit arbitrary because the MSBA has to make some sort of criteria. So they go by the age of the roof. Well, you know, you ever buy 2 cars, and the car that's newer is the one that is falling apart and you need to replace before the other one that for some reason keeps going? So this particular roof, it's 25 years old, but their new cutoff is 30 years old, the roof, because they have so many requests. But this roof is in bad shape. It's got to be replaced. One way or another, it has to move forward. We received communications from the school committee and the superintendent. You know, this is their top priority. As they started looking into it, we looked at all possibilities of patching the roof, sealing it temporarily. You would be talking about spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and only extend the roof by a matter of a couple of years. Given the fact that we got a couple of years of no chance at all of a grant, and beyond the Proctor School roof, we actually have another roof that's a little bit older in Z School that needs to be replaced. So this project needs to move forward one way or another. It's going to town meeting, and it can either be paid for with no tax impact using ARPA funds, or it can be financed with debt. It's a roof, it certainly qualifies for debt financing. Second project is the fire engine replacement. Again, this is a 20-year apparatus. It's been on the capital plan for 6 years. It needs to be replaced. This particular pumper, this engine is having a lot of mechanical issues. Again, sometimes the vehicle, you know, you got a vehicle that just is having a lot of issues. This vehicle is having a lot of issues. We need 3 apparatus with pumping capabilities in order to maintain our insurance, our fire insurance rating. So, so this vehicle absolutely needs to be replaced. And then last but not least, we have the highway tight tank. Again, when you wash vehicles, you're not supposed to have the salt and the grease going down the floor drain into the leaching field because it's a septic system at the highway garage. DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, requires it to go to a tight tank. Sitting here right now, we're not under consent order. DEP has flagged this and basically said, what's your plan for addressing this? Which means we're gonna give you a year or 2 to address it, or we're gonna address it for you with fines. So, again, nobody's done anything wrong here, it's just, you know, it's an older building, doesn't comply. This needs to, needs to be built. So it's a tight tank, all the washings go into the tank, and the tank then is pumped off and disposed of basically as hazardous, material. So that's $475,000. So I'm at the bottom of page 5 of the memo. So the estimated tax impacts. So these 3 projects total to $3,075,000. Again, if you were to use the ARPA funds, it would still leave, approximately $1.3 million in available funds for other projects. But if these projects go to town meeting, we don't pay cash for them. They go to town meeting, we finance them with debt. It would be, we would schedule them for a 10-year bond, and it would be about $61 on the average single-family home for 10 years to pay that off. So under our free cash policy, we try to pay cash for, if we have available funds, we try to pay cash for as many of these capital projects as we can to minimize the amount of debt that we're taking on. We do have kind of stacking up, a number of large projects. The fire station project is coming around. That's moving into design development. Those price escalations are, frankly, I couldn't even tell you exactly what that would cost now because the market is so volatile at the moment. But the fire station, we have a feasibility study on this building for a town hall. Again, we've passed, complete streets. We have a sidewalk inventory now that we know what the needs are, but there's no real funding plan for it yet. So we have a lot of, capital needs that are coming down the pike. On page 6 and forward, I mentioned just a couple of other ones. There's 3 other projects, in addition to those 3 projects, there's a few other ones that are flagged under the master plan. So the master plan priorities are downtown revitalization, sidewalks, walkability, connectivity, and just, roadway improvements. So there are sidewalk enhancements. We need, in order to maintain our sidewalks and start making progress like we do with our roadways, we really need to be appropriating $200,000 a year to that. Culvert drainage improvements. We saw a postponement of drainage work during the pandemic. We wanted to have $300,000 every other year to do drainage replacements. We have a couple neighborhoods that have some significant issues. That got delayed due to the pandemic. And then last but not least, you have the downtown revitalization strategy and design study. So that study is ongoing, but the town planner has indicated that the design phase for phase 1, and we're not there yet. The whole visualization and vision for the downtown isn't complete. But when it is, she's looking at about $250,000 for design work to then allow the town to apply for some mass work grants down the line. So that is anticipated that, sidewalk work, so drainage, roadway improvements, downtown revitalization. Those are other projects secondary in the capital improvement plan that are in the out years that could also be used for ARPA. Those aren't really, there's time to discuss those and to review those in more detail. The issue for us right now are those 3 projects, the Proctor roof, the fire engine replacement, and the tight tank. We need to make a decision on those because we need to wrap up and move forward for the upcoming town meeting. So I know committee members have been asking me what's happening with ARPA, what's the plan, how, are we gonna spend it on any capital? So this is just an attempt to sort of bring the information together so you can see it. Again, the board's gonna take this up at their meeting on Monday. So, and again, there's the memo from June 15th has all the background information on ARPA, and what it is and how the money can be spent and so forth. I just wanted to include that for context. So, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have regarding that memo.
On the ARPA funds, there's a time limit for allocating the funds and then a time limit for actually spending them.
Yes.
What are those dates?
So the timeline for expenditures, all the funds have to be fully obligated by December 31st, 2024, and fully expended by December 31st, 2026. So those funds
Okay.
do have a time limit on them. I should mention, the fire engine now is up to a 2-year wait from the time you order it to when you take possession of it.
If we do not spend the ARPA funds on these projects, what would we spend them on? Because we're basically going to start allocating those funds and spend them on something. What is the alternative for this?
The board has a laundry list of suggestions that were made through community input, but to date, there's no definitive spending plan.
Okay.
Beyond the limited projects, time-sensitive projects that I detailed at the beginning.
Well, this is when we did when they did the listening sessions to come up with ideas of how to spend the money. One of the concerns, and I said this at the meeting, is you can't have two separate priority lists. I think the town needs to look at what's coming down at it, and obviously these projects are very high priorities. And, we can't treat them as separate buckets. So sort of the alternative to doing this is taking on debt to do these projects, because one way or the other, we're going to do them, correct?
Correct. These projects need to move forward. They can't wait.
All right.
So basically, in a nutshell, it's, we have the money in the bank, we can use the money for these three projects, or we can take out debt, pay interest, have taxes go up, and just keep the money in the bank.
You can either fund it with debt or pay as you go. Yeah.
Do you want a motion, John?
I'm not asking for anything. You keep asking me as committee members, what are we doing? And I'm just giving you the information of where we are.
Well, it seems pretty obvious in a lot of ways that we should be spending the ARPA funds for these capital projects. Otherwise, we're gonna have a raise in taxes, and as it is, most people are having a lot of difficulty making ends meet because of the current inflation. Now, it supposedly is coming down, but you've still got to make up for what you lost in the past.
Could we make a motion as a board for appropriations to recommend to the Board of Selectmen on Monday that they suspend the ARPA funds on these projects?
The committee can make their thoughts known. Yes.
So moved?
Second?
I'm sorry, who was the second?
Second.
So you just need to determine what form that would be, is it the chair sending a communication, or it's up to it's up to the committee how you want to do that.
Any suggestions? I mean, my personal opinion is it should come from all of us. I think that holds more
Agreed.
weight,
Agreed.
if everybody's on board with that. I
Yeah,
think
it should become that it's a recommendation of the Appropriations Committee. And the Finance Committee is going to consider this later this week?
Financial planning started talking about it last week, and they're going to discuss it tomorrow night as well.
So,
what
yeah,
I'm
I
asking
think we
is
should
the
make a
format.
recommendation that we think this is the appropriate way to
Yes,
spend the ARPA funds.
yeah, that the three,
Those three.
Yeah, for those three projects.
yeah, the fire engine, the tight tank, and the Proctor School roof replacement,
Right.
that the ARPA fund should be used for those three projects in order to your point, Janice, to reduce the tax benefit on the community because of everything that's happened over the last couple of years with inflation.
And to cut down on the liabilities that are, you know, basically these are hanging over our head right now and they're real close, but the more we do to stay current gives us more options in the future as things come about to be able to decide how to deal with them. So
Right,
it seems to me it would be irresponsible to take on debt to pay for these when we have the money to pay for them.
right. And by using the cash now to pay for these projects, that frees up, and John, correct me if I'm misspeaking, but that frees up $3 million of debt capacity in the future that we could.
For the other big things that are coming down.
So there's no reason
Right.
to use that capacity now, increase taxes now, and pay interest on something now.
Right.
We could just use the money and have that debt capacity in the future.
Right.
So,
If that's the will of the board, then what I would suggest is that you authorize the chair to send that, someone has to draft a communication, and it's not appropriate to come from me, this is coming from you. We did receive a letter today from the school committee, and the superintendent basically requesting that the ARPA funds be used for their roof. That's their number one priority. They want to get that moving. So they're weighing in on that particular project, so.
yeah, I mean, it's, when you think about what drives home values in Northborough, it's, or in any community, it's property taxes and education. And here we are having a discussion about making an investment in education or raising taxes. It just doesn't make any sense.
So Tim, are you comfortable with drafting this?
Yes.
So should do we need like kind of a formal motion that says we recommend that the Board of Appropriations is recommending that these three projects be funded with ARPA funds, and we would like our chairman to kind of present that to the,
That would be appropriate.
okay.
Was that a motion?
So moved.
Trying to keep up with you guys.
So moved.
So George moved and Janice second. Okay, I got a vote.
All those in favor?
Okay. I'll look for that communication.
John, would it be appropriate to have a motion to adjourn, or do we have further business?
You've, just your meeting schedule, it should just take a moment.
So next on the agenda is just a review of the meeting schedule.
So next week, on the 15th, you'll have DPW coming in. They'll cover DPW solid waste enterprise funds. We may have some reserve transfers to talk to you about. We've had some repairs to this building's boiler, of all things, so we'll talk to you about that. And I'll have a draft town meeting warrant summary for you at your next meeting. On the 22nd, we've got Assabet Valley and the K-8 schools in Algonquin coming in. Just want to draw your attention, the meeting on February 22nd starts at 6 p.m. to make sure that we have enough time. So normally you meet at 7. Then on March 1st, we'll do finance office, debt, health insurance. We should have our health insurance numbers. I'm going to tip my cards a little bit to you. We were able to make some changes in retiree health insurance, in just terms of the plan offerings, not the quality. Nobody's upset. They're all happy, but we saved several $100,000. I'm hoping to bring we're waiting on the final renewals on health insurance, but I think they're going to be very reasonable for us this year. Certainly not going to be a budget buster for us this year. Then on 3/8, you've got police, fire budgets coming in. We're still in negotiations with police and fire unions. That's why we kind of have them come. Usually they come in early. We have them late. We're hoping to settle some of these contracts so that we don't have to do a two-step on those budgets. And then just by a reminder, on March 27th, this is the charter-required joint hearing. This is mandatory for you guys. It's a joint meeting, Appropriations Committee, Board of Selectmen, budget hearing. That's on March 27th. And then last but not least, I won't be here, but I wish you all the best. On April 24th is the town meeting. So that's your schedule. Now look this over. If there are any other departments or information that you would like presented to you, let your chairman know. He'll let me know, and we'll coordinate and get that department in here to provide them. These are the customary departments that you usually meet with. They're the larger ones, but we're happy to provide any information on any aspect of the budget that you would like. Okay?
Thank you.
So, but we are meeting every Wednesday. So,
So our next meeting is February 15th. Any other business to come before the committee?
I just have a quick housekeeping issue, I'm sorry. I had made a mistake at the top of this meeting, that I had approved the minutes for the meeting that I was absent at.
just so you're clear, you can approve minutes even if you weren't at the meeting.
Oh, okay.
Oftentimes, people abstain just because they say, well, I wasn't at the meeting.
Okay, so I didn't
If you
violate
like
anything.
to change the record to show that you abstain,
As long as it's okay and clean.
there's
I'm
nothing
fine.
wrong with it,
Okay,
but
I thought I made a mistake there. Okay, that's all.
you
Okay.
can do it either way.
All right.
It's not a hard-hitting document, it's just.
No, I know, but I didn't want anybody to get in trouble.
No, no, I would have stopped you if it was.
It's
Okay.
so short. Yes.
Okay?
Thanks.
Any other business?
Move to adjourn. Do you entertain a motion to adjourn?
Second? And a vote?
God, 5 minutes early.
Thank you, everybody.